Hi, everyone. It's Kelly from the Hub. We are here today with a new guest that you don't know. None of you know who this person is. Total mystery. This is my father. This is Roger Warner. He is my father. He is a former school teacher and let's just say Renaissance man. And I just don't say that because he's my father. He's also very cute, as you can see. Hi, Dad.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
The
So,
Renaissance man? Wow, I've been called a lot worse than that.
You're probably wondering why I have my dad on, and it's not for us to have a deep philosophical father-daughter conversation, although that could be a whole other thing. My dad's really good at a lot of things, and one of the things that he's really good at is wood stuff. So as lots of you remember, we have our gallery that we haven't been able to show because of, can't get together and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to figure out a way to bring art back. And I thought, let's try art out let's have Dad be the first guinea pig and we'll see if this works. And then we're going to add some more artists. So that's why he is our first guinea pig because, he's your dad. And so he generally says yes. So, hi, Dad.
Hi, I'd love to be the object of an experiment.
So Dad uses a lathe and turns things. And so some of you are like, of course, because my grandfather used to do that. And some of you are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So Dad said he hid some pieces right around so you can't see them in the camera. And so show us what using a lathe means you can make. Like, show us what you have that you're like, you can make this.
Well,
and then we'll talk about all the stuff.
Okay. So I'll start with simple.
Okay.
I guess when most people think about things that are made out of wood and turned on a lathe, they think about salad bowls.
Yeah, or like chair legs.
Or chair legs,
yeah.
Or the spindles that go underneath your railing on your porch or your
Oh, right. Yeah.
Or whatever, different kinds of stuff. But I guess there's two kinds of lathe turning for a little basic lesson. Those spindles and chair legs and stuff like that, that's called turning between centers. It's like, think of a baseball bat. You have to hold it on both ends. And your lathe has an attachment that holds this end and an attachment that holds this end. And all you do is turn that part, like a baseball bat or a spindle of some kind or a chair leg. The other kind of turning is like ball turning, open turning, where you can turn things that are hollow. And salad bowls fit into that category. So most people, when they think of a lathe, or when they start to turn on a lathe, they turn things between centers. It's easy. And it requires a lot less, requires less equipment. But then if you're interested in turning things that are hollow, you get a little bit more equipment and you end up turning things that might look like this. So this is about as plain a bowl a plain a thing as I have ever turned. It's big, as you can see. It's like 14 or 15 inches across. But if you look at the wood, I'll move it up a little closer to the camera. If you look at the wood, it's like pretty plain. It's maple. It would make a good salad bowl. It has a finish on it, which is compatible with food. So that's it. If you had a bunch of little salad bowls to go with it, that would, you'd have a salad set. Well, I want you to look at the bottom. Can you read that?
Yeah, RW98 maple.
Yeah, 98. I turned this in 1998. So that's 32 years ago I turned this. And it's no surprise, I suppose, to people who know wood that it still looks like new, sort of. So that's the kind of stuff that I turned when I first started. But then like a lot of arts or crafts people, after I got bored with that kind of stuff, then I went crazy and started doing all kinds of weird things.
So there are people who are watching who are like, oh yeah, my grandfather has a lathe. He's done it forever and it's really cool. And there are some people who have no idea what that is. So it'll be cool as we sort of do this series to make some of those people feel nostalgic, make some of those people feel like, oh, I remember that, or I've done that before, and have some people go, huh, this is something I didn't even know you could do as a person.
Right, right,
So I
right.
think this is going to be cool to be able to do this. So let's start with like the roots of all of this. So there are reasons why we do what we do. You were a high school teacher. First you taught high school English, and then you taught high school special education. And so how does a guy who reads James Joyce for fun at some point go,
Me.
because he really does. And for those of you who've ever read James Joyce, you're like, no, there's like 4 people in the world who do that. Yep, he's one of them. So how does a guy who does that, who used to do that for a living, become someone who goes, maple? Like, how do you even, or oak, or like, how does that also come out of you?
Well, we can go into the background and the history. That's a slightly different story, but the answer to your question there's 2 answers. One is that I've always sort of been interested in wood, doing stuff with wood, and I've always, ever since I was a kid, I was interested in turning, and I did my first turning when I was just a kid. Let's come back to that because I'll answer your question specifically. When you're a teacher, you go home at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the school year, and you say to yourself, I wonder, did I do anything that was worthwhile today or this year or this month or whatever? Did I really reach anybody? What did I do that is lasting? And you don't know. I'm lucky enough to still be in touch with lots of former students from a program that we did years ago here, and I still talk to a lot of those kids who are now grandparents, a lot of them. And once in a while, something will come up, and one of them will say, "Boy, I remember back in school when you did this, and that like changed my life. And I never read a book before that, and you made me want to read a book, whatever." So you don't know if you're doing any good, or you did something, but you don't know if it was good, if it had any impact. But when you make stuff with your hands or you build things, you know whether you did something good or not, because there it is. You got it in your hand.
Right, and if it's a table, it either stands up or it doesn't.
Yeah, you know if it's good,
right.
and if it's not good, you can fix it. You can just take it and do it again.
Yeah.
Or throw it away and start again. But you can't do that with students.
Right. Right, that's weird. Right.
Right. But so I always wanted to mow the grass on a golf course. I thought that would be a cool job. When you're done, you look out there and you say, boy, look how slick that is. I did that. But you don't know that as a teacher. So that's the specific answer that, I took the skills that I had and the interests that I had outside of the classroom and put them to work to do something. And when I'm done with it, I know it's finished and I know it's good. So concrete.
Yeah.
There you go. Why did I spend all my time saying that when I could have just said it's concrete?
So the other answer is why wood? So so as we're sort of exploring this, I think the people who are watching this are going to go, like people right now are like, wow, he makes something that's beautiful. And I think what it'll be fun to explore like the craft and the art, because I think that there are people who are like, great, nice job, crafts guy. And there are other people who sort of have seen wood lathe stuff and are going to be like, dude, I think this guy makes some art. And so it'll be interesting to see how that sort of progresses. But like, I guess my other question for you is truly, like, you make stuff and you've made stuff forever, but like, why wood? Why was wood your medium? I mean, because there was a time when you also used to do some pen and ink. And that was, I mean, that was a sort of a short-lived time, but you did stuff in pen and ink for a while. But wood is your medium for a lot, in a lot of ways. So why wood? Do you know?
Yeah, well, one thing that you know that the other people wouldn't know is that I bought this house in 1979, and in 1981 I installed a wood burning stove.
Yep.
And in 1982 and 1983 I bought firewood. And then I said, why am I doing this? I don't have to pay somebody to do this. I can do this myself. So starting in 1983 until 2019,
which is a long ass time for those of you who are doing the math.
That's the way I would describe it, exactly. I cut and split and processed all my own firewood, at least 6 cords a year, if not more. And so that's like the end game to your answer. Yep. About I always had access to wood. I live in an old community which has a lot of mature trees, and they fall down sometimes, and hurricane or little tornadoes come along and knock them down, and they die, and people cut them down. And there's this, my city has a tree department that comes along and cuts the trees that are on the city property.
All right, so pause for a second. You heard him say city. My father does not live in a rural area. He lives in Cleveland Heights, which has sidewalks and houses are in it. This is a city. So, I mean, there are not a lot of people who are watching this who are like, wait, he heats his house in the city when he has access to gas lines? And yes, because this is who he is. This is my whole life. Right. So, because that's unusual for a lot of for people. So, and when he talks about so Lucy's barking. For those of you who watch, you know Lucy. Somebody's mowing the lawn. So he goes around when there are storms with his chainsaw and the van and knocks on people's doors. Hi, I see you have a tree down. You want some help? Can I have some of the wood that I do? And so then that's what happens.
Well, and actually, last week I was driving down the street to go to, I don't know where I was. I think I was going to physical therapy or something. And the city guys were down at the end of the street, and they just cut down a big tree. And as I got up close to them, one of the guys went, "Hey, how you doing, buddy?" They're like my friends. I've known these guys for years. They don't call me on the phone when they're cutting down a tree, but when the chainsaw is running in the neighborhood, I know. And I go, and they said, "Oh yeah, Warner's here."
Right. Everybody's got friends. He has friends with the city public works department or whatever department that is.
Right. And just
awesome.
So you know, I live in the suburbs, and it's an older suburb. So I'm looking out my window over this way. And if my neighbor was standing there at the sink washing dishes, I could see him. So yep. That's where we are.
So he has managed wood to heat his entire home for 40 years.
Just about. Yeah.
And my stepmother, Jane, who she might come over at some point as we're doing stuff, and I have been trying to convince Dad to give it up for, I don't know, 30 of those 40 years?
Maybe. But it kept me young and vibrant.
That's right. And every year for the last, I don't know, maybe 10, he would say, "I'm giving it up. This is the last year. I only have 5 cord in the basement," or whatever it was. And we were all like, after so much time, yeah, it's never going to happen. And so This last winter was the last winter, and he gave up all the wood. I know, and like we never thought, we almost had to have a party, but then COVID happened, and so we couldn't. But we almost had a party for the end of the wood season. And he got a new, like, heating system, and all is good. So you have heated your house with wood for 742 years.
Right. No,
But how does that even enter your body? Like, that means that you have loved wood in a weird way. It's almost weird. Your whole life.
yeah, I always thought of myself with the wood burning stove. I always thought of myself as the best recycler in the city, because what happens, these guys in the city, at least, they cut down these dead trees and they take them to the landfill, and they have to pay to dump the big truckload full of trees at the landfill. So instead of the city paying, they get me to take it for free. I get it for free. But I have had relatives and friends and people say, you mean, how much is your gas bill? And I say, oh, like $30, because I have a gas stove and a gas hot water heater, or whatever. $30. They say, man, I'd give anything to have free heat. And my response to that is, oh, no, you would not. You wouldn't maintain 2 chainsaws, a bunch of hand tools, a strap-on back brace that you have to wear, work your butt off in the heat of the summer, work your butt off in the cold of the winter, carry the wood home, split the wood and carry it out back, carry it in the house, clean up the ashes, carry out the ashes, all the mess and all the, whatever.
Right.
It's not free. And,
right. I mean, time is money. You have put in the time rather than putting in the money.
Right.
And but you also love it. So for you, it's not about time versus money. It's about this is what you do.
But I have to tell you, I'm getting used to this business of being able to sit and watch a TV show in the winter without having to get up 2 or 3 times and put wood in the stove, or go down the basement and get more wood and bring it up and come back and ask Jane, what happened? What did I miss? Because I was going down the basement getting an armful of wood. So, and I live in an old house, so there's no easy way to adapt. Some people have a through the wall kind of thing where they store a bunch of wood in there, and all they have to do is open up the cupboard and pull out the wood. Not me, no.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
and,
all right.
I mean, and as a kid being in that house, the awesomest feeling is that being with the wood stove and opening the doors and feeling that feeling and the smell of wood in the house. And that has become part of my life because that was your life.
Yeah.
But like, you really, never really answered the question.
Well, wait, before you go to the question, I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay, hold on. So this is what it's like when you interview your father, right? It's totally different.
Right. An interesting perspective. I said to my next door neighbor, who was in the house, he bought his house right next to me a couple of years before I did. I said to him, well, I hate to tell you this, but you're not, you're going to be happy. You're not going to have to put up with the smell of my wood stove anymore. And he went, happy? What do you mean happy? He said, I look forward every winter to opening the door and stepping outside and, Roger's burning the wood stove. I love the smell of that wood smoke in the neighborhood. So go figure.
Yep.
One man's poison.
Right. I mean, I think everybody who knows that smell has driven down the street or wherever in their own neighborhood and someone lights their fire.
Yeah. All right. So back to the question.
Yeah.
My father was a man who was a handyman, and he could do woodworking, although he wasn't very good, I discovered later, woodworking, electrical, plumbing, masonry, all kinds of stuff. So I learned from my father to use tools. And in the basement was a very, very rustic, old-fashioned lathe. And so as a kid, I remember saying to him, what's that? And he told me it's a lathe, and go away, son, you bother me. And at one point he said, oh, you're asking all these questions, I'll show you how to do it. So he showed me how to do it. And I took a piece of maple scrap somewhere, and I made on the lathe, I made for my mother. This is going to date me. There won't be a whole lot of people in the audience who know what the hell I'm talking about. I made for my mother a darning egg. She used to darn our socks, and so people saying, what does that mean? Like, oh, those darn socks. No, you take yarn, and if you get socks, get a hole in it, you take yarn and you patch it. And in order to do that, you need to put inside the sock, you need to put something in there to hold the sock so you can work on it. Well, some people used to use a light bulb. Well, so I made a thing out of maple that looked like a light bulb with a handle, about this big. That's maybe 6 or 7 inches. So she would take that and put it inside the sock, and then she could darn it. And that's the first thing I ever made on the lathe. In fact,
and how old were you?
12. It may be the only thing I ever made on the lathe where I might have made some other things just playing around, but it was the only really like productive, useful thing made on the lathe. And I don't know where it is. My mother's been gone a number of years, and 2 of my 3 brothers have a lot of her stuff, and I think maybe one of them might have that somewhere in a box somewhere, or maybe it's gone altogether. I don't know. But anyhow, so that's where it started. But then, so it's my father and tools, and I always liked tools, and making that darning egg on the lathe for my mother. But then there's a third reason that I realized when you asked me about where this came from. And your dog is barking and my phone is ringing. So up on the shelf in our living room, in our little house out in Andover, Ohio, out on the Pennsylvania border, this sat up there for as long as I can remember. And as you can tell, this is turned on a lathe. Has a lid. It's a hollow. It's got a piece of paper inside to identify it for you when you come and clean out my house someday. But this stood up on the shelf for as long as I can remember. And I asked my mother once, what is that? And she said, where did it come from? And she said, this belonged to my grandmother. I said, your grandmother? It's like, and my mother was almost 90 when she died 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever. So that dates this to the old farmhouse out in Dorset, Ohio, the dairy farm that's been in my family for at least 6 generations, and still my family still lives, my cousins still live there. So I said, well, where was it? She said, well, we had an old wood cook stove. So there's the house, and then there's like a summer kitchen almost, and then there's the woodshed on the back, and the wood stove stood in there. This stood up on the warming shelf in the wood stove. And I said, I sort of, when as a real young child, I have a vague recollection that there was a wood stove in that old farmhouse when I would go up and visit my grandparents, although my great-grandmother wasn't alive anymore. She said, my great-grandmother used to keep cream of tartar inside of this. What the hell is cream of tartar? I don't even know what that is. I guess you use it when you make a lemon meringue, a lemon pie, or pudding, or such a thickener, I guess.
Yep.
So I said, yeah, okay, but what about this? I don't, okay, the cream of tartar, but what about this container? And she didn't know. She said, my grandmother used to call it peas. I said, you mean like peas and carrots? No, peas, P-E-A-S-E. I said, well, what does that mean? She said, I don't know. And she said, well, when I die, you can have it. So here it is. And I discovered later, somewhere along the way, when the internet came up and you could start asking Google questions and actually get answers, I asked Google about peas. And it turns out that, you know the answer to this, but if I said to the average person, okay, if I hadn't told you that story about my great grandmother and you looked at this little wooden jar, how old would you think it was? And the answers would be all over the map. This jar could have been made as early as the end of the Civil War, 1865. That's about the time the company started in Concord, Ohio, and it lasted until about 1910. And all the pieces that they made have very unique identifiable features. You can see the little finial on the top looks like an acorn upside down, and it's known for that. It's known for these rings that you can maybe see if it's not too blurry. The rings that go around the bottom. It's known for these rings that are on the sides, ring here, and the foot, the shape of the foot, and the look of the bottom. They made these for 50 years in this town of Concord, Ohio, which is out by Painesville. And this is really, I've heard people call this, this is essentially Civil War Tupperware. Yep. These are the containers that people bought from this company. They made thousands of them, containers that they bought to keep stuff in. I was always I don't know why, but from the time I was a kid, I was intrigued by this jar. I now own about 50 jars that were made by this company because I've started to collect them as a result of this. So that's another offshoot. I've thought, as you told me you're going to ask me that question about where this came from. My father's tools, love of tools, the darning, and my being intrigued with this is where it all came from. And on that lathe at home, I know I'm talking a long spell here. On that lathe at home, I never knew that you could make something that was hollow. All I knew is that you could make something that was shaped like a stick, fancy. And actually, I got one of those. I bought a kit to make a back scratcher. And it sat in my basement for a long time. And I said, I don't want to do that. That's like too simple. But then I made the handle for it that you can see.
That's adorable.
This is what I thought you could make on a lathe.
Well, right.
But, I mean, this is like boring.
Well,
so limited.
And like for you, that takes like an hour. I mean, it doesn't.
That's a little harder because, right. But yeah, you're right.
Right. And you don't have to, there's not a lot of thinking involved in that. And for those of you who have lathed before, you know what we're talking about. And for those of you who haven't, you're like, what the hell? Don't worry, we'll talk about that. So this is one of those things that I think that every artist, and he gets very weirded out when I call him an artist, but he is. Every artist has the story of how they became. And those are the bits of you that turned into a person who loves to make stuff with tools and then loves to turn, beautiful, ugly wood, because I think we would both say that some of the stuff that you have turned over the last at least 20 years is beautiful, ugly wood into incredibly cool things. So we'll sort of explore that as we go.
Yeah, but just to give a little teaser, I brought in.
Okay, good. Tease away.
Most people would think, you're going to make something. You just start with a beautiful 2x10 and make it cut it round and make a plate.
Right.
Perfect. Like reminiscent of this.
The salad bowl. Yep.
It's simple. It's plain. It's whatever. I've gone from there to the point where, for me, this is a beautiful piece of wood.
Right, and that's
Most
beautiful.
Would say this goes right directly into the wood stove.
Absolutely, right.
It's so ugly that nobody could ever make anything nice out of that. And yet, and we'll come back later in another episode, but what I make out of something like that looks like this. Oops, wait a minute. What am I going to have to do here? Wait a minute, hold on a minute. Can you
That's
see it?
perfect. Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Yeah. Right. And so this is going to be fun because people who've never seen this before are going to be like, "Who? What the actualness could happen to make that piece of nastiness into that?" Right.
Yeah, because all these holes and cracks and variations and slots and whatever and bark around the edges is what that ugly piece of wood will turn into if you put it on a lathe and make it round.
Yeah. So those of you who are thinking to yourself, huh, we just went into art. And the answer is yes, we did. We just went. But what's so cool about this, and that's why I love lathe stuff, as a person who has literally, I think I've touched a tool and put it on a piece of wood once. But I have such an appreciation for it because it can be simultaneously, just like lots of other kinds of art, so practical and so useful because you need chair legs. I mean, when a chair leg breaks, you need new chair legs. And so you can make that. You can literally make bats called Louisville sluggers, but we can talk about that too. And then you can make exquisite pieces of art. And that's so cool.
I didn't get there in a week,
right.
or in a year, or in 5 years. I gradually moved that way towards making things that people look at them and say, well, what could I use that for?
Yeah.
And my usual response is, well, it's really not meant to be used, because when you look at it, you'll notice it's got holes in the bottom and holes in the side. So if you fill it full of M&Ms, it ain't gonna work. Right. It's not meant to be used. It's meant to be looked at and touched and admired. And I recently put a video of this thing on a website, and I'm trying to figure out how to describe what I do now. And although I still do like to do these. I still make stuff that looks sort of like this. But in trying to describe what I do now, I said, the only purpose of this vase is to show off the beauty that's hidden inside of trees. So that's kind of, that's why I don't make salad bowls anymore. Because, yeah, it's a tree, but it's not beautiful in the way, it's not complicated, maybe. I'm talking, it's beautiful, it may be a beautiful design. You may like the design, but there's nothing special about the wood.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for pieces of wood that have a personality of their own to make something that's different. Yeah. So, whatever.
And I think that that's the perfect way to end this, because I want people to keep that in their brain.
Okay.
That's the perfect way to end this one, to say that
Good.
you are trying to show people the beauty of the wood and the beauty of the trees. Yeah.
There's things hidden inside trees that you can hardly imagine.
You would never know.
Besides ants and worms and bird nests.
And there's lots to talk about that too.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. This was fun. I hope that you like hanging out with my dad. And if you ever want to ask any questions about lathe stuff, feel free. Send us a message. Put it in the comments. It's beautiful. See you next week.
See ya.